So that's the plan for the new deck.
Sounds good, but what about the supports?
It's like we are already in the future. We have so many possibilities.
So what do you think about this new craft beer release?
I'm really enjoying the tropical notes in this one. It's quite refreshing.
I brought these fresh from the farm this morning.
Yeah, they look very good. How much are they?
For you, a special price. Now, if you do get a little bit of residue left from that sticker, you can just use a little bit of Gougon.
The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the small wooden house, painting the walls with golden streaks as Ly Tieu Ca gently stirred awake. At only 17 years old, she carried the weight of motherhood with a grace that seemed beyond her years, her arms often full with her infant son long, and her heart tied closely to her daughter Han. Life had not been easy, but in the quiet rhythm of everyday tasks, fetching water, cooking simple meals, and caring for the children, she found moments of peace. The first sound that greeted her was the soft laughter of Han, who was already awake and trying to rock her little brother's cradle. Tieu Ca smiled at the sight. Han was growing into such a responsible girl, always ready to help her mother in small but meaningful ways. Outside, the air still carried the freshness of the night's rain. Drops of water clung to the banana leaves, shimmering like diamonds as the sunlight spread over the fields. Ly Tieu Ca had always loved mornings when the world felt new and forgiving, as though each day could be a chance to start again. She took Han and Long out to the pond near their home. With a small net, she caught a few fish, not to keep, but to show her children the joy of setting them free. She lowered them gently into the water and whispered to Han, "See, now they can swim in their new home." Han nodded seriously, her little fingers gripping her mother's hand as if she too understood the lesson about kindness and freedom. Even baby Long gurgled happily, as though he too sensed the simple beauty of the moment. The days of a single mother were filled with endless tasks, yet Ly Tieu Ca managed them with a quiet strength. After the pond, she set the children under the shade of a tree with a small blanket and gave Han the duty of watching over her brother. It amazed her how the little girl embraced the role of caretaker, carefully fanning her baby brother to keep away the flies. This allowed Ly Tieu Ca to work in the garden, watering the vegetables, pulling weeds, and picking ripe fruits that would later feed her family or be sold at the market. She worked with deliberate care, knowing that every plant, every small harvest meant another step toward survival, yet there was also joy in it. She loved the feeling of soil on her hands, the smell of wet earth, and the knowledge that she could provide for her children with her own effort. Later that day, she prepared to visit the lumber yard where she sometimes took on small jobs. It was there that she encountered Tuan, a diligent worker, and the man they all called Boss, a figure of quiet authority named Hung. Their conversation drifted naturally to the latest shipment of wood imported from Cambodia. The logs, unfortunately, were not up to standard. Some were shorter than required, which meant profits would fall. Tieu Ca listened carefully as the men discussed, not because she fully understood the complexities of trade, but because she sensed how deeply these matters affected the lives of those around her. Hung, calm but firm, instructed his men to be more vigilant in checking future shipments. His voice carried both the weight of responsibility and the quiet reassurance of someone who truly cared about the people who worked for him. Though she was only there to lend small assistance, sweeping, carrying lighter loads, Tieu Ca felt a subtle respect from Hung. Unlike many men who saw her only as a poor single mother, Hung treated her as an equal, often speaking gently and with genuine interest. On that day, they also talked about a bridge project being supervised by a man named Thang, one that would connect her modest shelter to the main road. For Tieu Ca, the thought of an easier path home brought relief, as it would make carrying food and goods back less exhausting. She thanked Hung sincerely, her eyes shining with gratitude, though she quickly lowered her gaze, shy of showing too much emotion. When the day's work ended, she turned her attention to harvesting avocados. Their green skin gleamed against the backdrop of leaves, and she carefully selected those that had ripened just enough. With a basket balanced against her hip, she made her way to the market. Selling was never easy. Every coin counted, and she often worried if buyers would bargain too harshly. But that day was kind to her. She sold her avocados for 10,000 zhong per kilogram, and the supportive smiles of the villagers eased her fatigue. Each sale was more than a transaction. It was proof that her hard work had value, that she could stand on her own 2 feet, even in the face of hardship. With the money earned, Tieu Ca allowed herself a rare indulgence. She visited a small store to buy essentials for her children. At first, she hesitated at the shelves of colorful clothes and cartons of milk, worrying about the cost. But she reminded herself that Han and Long deserved the very best she could provide. Han's eyes widened with delight as her mother picked a new dress for her, while baby Long cooed softly as if he too could sense the love stitched into the fabric. The bill came to 500,000 zhong, a significant sum for her modest means, but she carried the bags home with pride rather than regret. Just as she left the store, the weather changed. Dark clouds rolled in, and rain began to fall heavily, soaking the ground and quickening her steps. Tieu Ca's first thought was of the clothes drying outside their home. They would surely be drenched if she did not return quickly. She also worried about her children, who had been spending the afternoon with their grandmother. Her heart pounded as she hurried through the rain, clutching the shopping bags to her chest. In that moment, she felt once more the endless balancing act of her life, always running, always protecting, always giving. Yet when she returned home, a surprise awaited her. CEO Hung was already there, busying himself with small tasks. He had noticed that the light bulbs in her house were too dim, and with the storm clouds thickening the night, he worried for the safety of the family. Without a word of complaint, he had brought new bulbs, purchased from his younger brother, and was installing them one by one. Tieu Ca, soaked and tired, could only stand in the doorway watching him, her heart swelling with emotions she could not name. Gratitude, yes, but also a fragile warmth she had long suppressed. When she mentioned that she needed to fetch her children from their grandmother's house, Hung insisted she go quickly, promising to wait. True to his word, when she returned with Han and Long, they found not only a brightly lit home, but also a meal waiting on the table. The aroma of freshly cooked rice and vegetables filled the room, and Han squealed with excitement at the unexpected feast. Tieu Ca was moved nearly to tears. She had grown used to carrying burdens alone, but here was a man who, without being asked, had stepped in to share the load. They ate together in the soft glow of the new lights. Han eagerly fed her baby brother small spoonfuls of rice, while Hung amused Long by gently bouncing him in his arms. The sight was almost surreal to Tieu Ca, who had forgotten what it felt like to be surrounded by such warmth. She sat quietly for a moment, taking it all in: the laughter of her children, the comfort of a well-cooked meal, and the steady presence of Hung at her side. In that moment, the walls of her small house no longer felt confining, but rather like the walls of a true home. Hung, as if sensing her thoughts, explained softly that he had bought the light bulbs from his younger brother's shop, wanting to ensure she had something reliable. It was such a small detail, yet it revealed his character. He was a man who not only helped, but did so thoughtfully, involving his family, sharing his resources. For Tieu Ca, who had often been made to feel like an outsider in her own village, this simple act of inclusion touched her deeply. She realized that kindness, when genuine, carried the power to heal wounds she had long hidden. As the evening drew to a close, the rain eased, leaving the world outside smelling fresh and new. Inside, however, it was the light of human connection that glowed brightest. Ly Tieu Ca tucked Han and Long into bed, listening to their soft breaths as they drifted to sleep. She then stepped quietly back into the main room, where Hung sat finishing his meal. Their eyes met, and for a moment the silence between them felt louder than words. There was no declaration, no promise, yet something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of the possibility of building something more than survival, perhaps even a future filled with hope. And so the first chapter of this new beginning ended not with grand gestures, but with the gentle rhythms of everyday life. For Ly Tieu Ca, every sunrise was still a test of endurance, but with Hung's presence, she began to see that she did not have to face it all alone. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it seemed like a path worth walking. The following morning began much like the one before, with the gentle hum of village life awakening outside. Roosters crowed in the distance. The sound of rushing water from the nearby stream blended with the chatter of early risers. And once again, Ly Tieu Ca found herself juggling the simple yet demanding tasks of a mother. Han tugged at her sleeve, eager to help, while little Long clung to her arm with the unshakable neediness of infancy. She carried them both with a mixture of fatigue and determination, her heart full of love even as her body ached from constant labor. Today was market day, which meant there would be no pause, no luxury of rest. Every coin earned meant food on the table and the chance to give her children a better future. She started with the avocado trees in the small grove near her home. The fruits glistened in the early light, heavy and ripe, demanding attention. Climbing lightly despite her weariness, she plucked them with practiced hands, each one carefully lowered into the basket tied at her hip. Han watched with admiration, standing guard over her baby brother, occasionally pointing out fruits her mother had missed. "There, Mama," she cried, her voice sharp with pride. Tieu Ca smiled and whispered her thanks, encouraging Han to feel useful, to understand that survival was not her burden alone, but a shared journey they all carried together. Once the baskets were full, she shifted her focus to preparing herself for the long walk to the market. The road was dusty, winding, and often unforgiving under the sun. Yet she welcomed the walk, for it gave her time to think, to plan, to dream. On her back, she carried Long, securely tied with a cloth wrap, while Han clutched her hand and skipped beside her. Despite the weight of the baskets, the sight of her children kept her moving forward. They were her strength, her purpose, the reason she endured. By the time they arrived at the marketplace, sweat glistened on her forehead, but determination burned brighter than exhaustion. The market bustled with energy, vendors calling out their prices, the clamor of coins changing hands, the laughter and bargaining of neighbors. Tieu Ca set up her small stall, arranging the avocados with care, knowing presentation mattered as much as quality. Her voice, though soft, carried sincerity, and that sincerity drew people in. One by one, villagers approached, some buying out of need, others out of support for the young mother they had come to respect. She sold each kilogram at 10,000 zhong, smiling humbly as coins clinked into her small pouch. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the wheel of survival turning. Watching Han hand over fruit to customers and say thank you in her small, serious voice filled Tieu Ca with a pride that outweighed the day's earnings. Later, as the last of her stock was sold, she made her way toward the small store at the edge of the market. With the money she had earned, she bought essentials, milk for Long, a pair of shoes for Han, and hesitantly, a small packet of sugar to sweeten their rare treats. Each purchase was a careful calculation, a balancing act between necessity and the small joys that reminded her children of happiness beyond survival. The shopkeeper, noticing her frugality, quietly slipped an extra piece of candy into Han's hand, a gesture that brought a shy smile to the little girl's face and tears of gratitude to her mother's eyes. The rain returned in the afternoon, as it often did during the season, heavy and unrelenting. Tieu Ca hurried home, the weight of her bags pulling against her as the children grew restless. When she finally reached the safety of her house, she was stunned to see Hung once again waiting for her. He was seated casually at her doorway, as though he belonged there, a bag of supplies resting at his side. "I thought you might need these," he said simply, handing her a few fresh light bulbs, some nails, and even a set of cooking spices. His presence, steady and unassuming, brought warmth to the small house. Dinner that evening became an unexpected celebration. Hung insisted on helping her cook, rolling up his sleeves and laughing when he clumsily chopped vegetables. Han giggled at the sight, teasing him for his awkwardness, while Baby Long clapped his hands, delighted by the lively atmosphere. For the first time in months, Tieu Ca felt what it was like to share the burden of responsibility. Hung didn't just provide material support, he provided companionship, filling the silences that had long haunted her evenings with laughter and gentle words. She found herself stealing glances at him, wondering how someone of his stature and resources could find contentment in her humble home. As the meal simmered, a conversation unfolded. Hung spoke of the lumber yard, the difficulties of importing quality wood, and the bridge project that was slowly taking shape. Tieu Ca listened intently, fascinated not so much by the business details, but by the passion with which he spoke. In return, she shared snippets of her life, how she had learned to farm, how she bartered for every necessity, how she dreamed of seeing her children educated and free from the struggles that defined her own youth. Hung's eyes softened with each word, and though he did not say it outright, his admiration for her resilience shone through. By the time they sat down to eat, the rain had softened into a steady drizzle, casting the house in a cocoon of warmth. They ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but the sense of family that filled the room. Hung held Baby Long in his arms, rocking him gently, his large hands surprisingly tender. Han leaned against him, her small frame tucked safely at his side, already treating him as though he were part of their world. Tieu Ca watched in silence, her heart swelling with emotions she struggled to name. Gratitude, yes, but also a stirring hope she had long suppressed. After dinner, when the children were asleep, the quiet between them grew heavier, yet not uncomfortable. Tieu Ca folded clothes while Hung lingered, his presence a silent promise. He finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "You've carried too much alone. Let me share it with you." The words were simple, but they landed like a confession, wrapping around her heart with undeniable warmth. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she met his gaze and saw sincerity reflected there. For the first time in years, she considered the possibility of leaning on someone without fear of betrayal. The following days unfolded with the same rhythm of toil and small joys, yet something had shifted. Hung appeared more often, sometimes to check on the progress of the bridge, sometimes with small offerings, a bag of rice, a book for Han, a soft blanket for Long. Each gesture was framed as practical, but beneath it lay an unspoken affection. Tieu Ca, though cautious, could not deny the comfort his presence brought. She found herself waiting for his visits, listening for the sound of his footsteps on the path, her heart quickening in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the doorway, Hung spoke of his family. He shared memories of his younger brother, who had helped supply the bulbs for her house, and stories of his own childhood filled with discipline and expectation. "We didn't have much time for softness," he admitted, his eyes distant. "Perhaps that's why I admire yours so much." Tieu Ca, touched, reached for words but found none sufficient. Instead, she simply nodded, allowing silence to carry the depth of her understanding. It was in these quiet exchanges that their bond deepened, not in dramatic declarations, but in the accumulation of small, meaningful moments. Each shared meal, each laugh over clumsy mistakes in the kitchen, Each story, whispered in the glow of lamplight, became threads weaving them closer together. For Tieu Ca, who had long braced herself against disappointment, this closeness was both terrifying and exhilarating. For Hung, accustomed to power and responsibility, it was grounding, a reminder of what truly mattered. One night, after another long day at the market, Tieu Ca returned home exhausted. She collapsed onto the bench, her body aching from the weight of her burdens. Without a word, Hung moved to her side, taking the heavy basket from her arms. "Rest," he said firmly, guiding her to lean back. For the first time, she allowed herself to do just that, to let someone else carry the load, if only for a moment. In his steady presence, she felt not only cared for, but seen, truly seen, as more than a struggling mother, but as a woman deserving of tenderness. The rain had not stopped for days, turning paths into streams of mud and the air into a damp weight that pressed against the skin. Yet within Ly Tieu Ca's small home, there was warmth. Hung had stayed longer this time, his visits no longer fleeting moments, but days spent helping her shoulder the relentless demands of life. He split firewood in the mornings, his strong hands steady against the axe, while she watched from the doorway with Long balanced on her hip. Han often ran to his side, asking questions, laughing when he lifted her onto his shoulders, making the world look smaller from that height. It was in these days that the fragile line between guest and family blurred, and Tieu Ca realized that the house felt empty when he wasn't there. But the world beyond their walls was not always kind. Whispers began to circulate in the village about why a powerful man like Hung would spend so much time in the home of a young, single mother. Some neighbors smiled knowingly, others shook their heads with suspicion. Tieu Ca felt the sting of their words even when they weren't spoken directly to her. One afternoon while buying rice, she overheard two women gossiping, their voices sharp as knives. "She's lucky, isn't she? First abandoned, now pampered by a man like that. Who knows what she offered him to stay?" The words lodged deep in her chest, twisting old wounds of shame and fear. She returned home with tears she tried to hide, but Hung noticed immediately. That evening, as they sat by the fire, he confronted the heaviness in her eyes. "Tell me," he urged, his tone both gentle and commanding. At first, she resisted, shaking her head, unwilling to admit the cruelty she endured. But the dam broke, and she confessed, her voice trembling. "They don't understand. They think I don't deserve this, that I don't deserve you." Silence followed, and for a moment she feared he would agree. Instead, Hung leaned forward, his gaze fierce. "You've given more than any of them could imagine. You've fought for your children, for survival. If anyone questions your worth, it is because they cannot measure up to your strength." His words, firm and unwavering, wrapped around her like armor. For the first time, she believed that perhaps she wasn't just surviving. She was worthy of being loved. The days grew brighter after that storm of doubt. Hung's presence became a shield against the harshness of gossip, his respect for her silencing many of the whispers. More importantly, he continued to show her, through action rather than words, that she was not alone. He worked with Tuan and the men at the lumber yard to secure more income for the bridge project, insisting part of the budget be used to improve the roads near her home. He explained it as practicality, but Tieu Ca saw the truth. He was carving a path not just for commerce, but for her children, so their steps towards school would be easier, safer. One afternoon, after returning from the market, Tieu Ca found Hung waiting with something unusual, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a set of books, clean and new, their pages smelling faintly of ink. "For Han," he said simply. The little girl's eyes widened, her fingers brushing reverently across the covers. Books were rare luxuries in their home, treasures that carried worlds beyond their small village. Han clutched them tightly, her face glowing with excitement. "Thank you, Uncle Hung," she exclaimed, her voice ringing with joy. Tieu Ca watched, her heart swelling with gratitude so fierce it hurt. Each gesture, each sacrifice he made, wove him deeper into the fabric of their lives. But even as happiness blossomed, shadows lingered. One evening, while carrying water from the well, Tieu Ca felt her knees buckle. The weight of exhaustion had finally caught up to her. She collapsed, the world spinning, her body trembling with weakness. In an instant, Hung was there, his arms wrapping around her, lifting her with a strength that seemed unshakable. He carried her inside, his voice tight with worry as he scolded her gently. "You push yourself too hard. You can't do everything alone, not anymore." She wanted to protest, to claim independence, but the truth was undeniable. She was human, fragile, and for once she allowed herself to rest in his embrace, to accept the care she had long denied herself. The following days became a turning point. Hung took control with quiet determination, ensuring she ate properly, arranging help for her work, and watching over the children with tenderness that left her speechless. Han would curl against him during the evenings, long nestled securely in his lap, and the image was so complete, so whole, that Tieu Ca often found herself fighting tears. It was a glimpse of a family she had never dared to dream of, now unfolding before her eyes. Hung's presence was no longer a gift she feared would vanish. It was becoming a constant, a promise of permanence. Their bond deepened not in grand declarations, but in the rhythm of ordinary life. They harvested together, cooked together, shared laughter over small mistakes. At night, when the children slept, they spoke quietly about fears and dreams. Hung revealed the pressures of his world, expectations, betrayals, the weight of leadership. Tieu Ca revealed her loneliness, her fears of inadequacy, her desire to give her children more than survival. In these confessions, they found not weakness, but connection, each word stitching them closer. One night, under a sky glittering with stars, Hung finally voiced what had long lingered unspoken. "Tieu Ca," he said, his voice steady yet trembling with intensity. "You and the children, you are my home." The words stunned her, piercing through layers of doubt and hesitation. She searched his face for hesitation, but found only truth. Her reply was quiet, a whisper carried on the night air. "And you are the safety I never thought I would find." In that moment, the distance between them vanished, not through passion alone, but through the binding power of trust, of two lives scarred yet willing to heal together. From then on, plans for the future became real conversations. Hung spoke of building a sturdier house for them, one that would shield them from storms, with enough room for the children to grow and learn. He even hinted at sending Han to a better school, promising to support her education fully. Tieu Ca, though hesitant at first, began to allow herself to imagine it. Rooms filled with light, walls echoing with laughter, a life where fear no longer overshadowed every step. Hope, once a fragile flame, now burned bright within her. The villagers, once skeptical, began to see the truth through his unwavering devotion. When they saw Hung carrying Long through the marketplace, Han walking proudly at his side, and Tieu Ca smiling with a lightness that had long been absent, many softened their judgment. Respect replaced suspicion, and slowly the small family found themselves embraced rather than isolated. For Tieu Ca, it was a redemption she had never sought, but one she accepted with humility. The story reached its quiet climax not in a dramatic confrontation, but in the gentle unfolding of love into permanence. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the roof, Hung gathered them together after dinner. He looked at Han and Long with affection, then turned to Tieu Ca with a seriousness that stole her breath. "I don't want to just visit. I don't want to just help. I want to be here with you, with them, always." The room held its breath as Tieu Ca's heart pounded. She saw the truth in his eyes, the certainty of a man who had made his choice. And though fear still lingered, she found herself nodding, tears streaming as she whispered, "Yes, stay." What followed was not a sudden transformation, but the continuation of the life they had already begun. Laughter, shared burdens, plans woven together. Yet beneath it all lay a deeper foundation: trust, love, and the promise of a future no longer haunted by survival alone. For Tieu Ca, who had once believed her story would be written in hardship, this was a new chapter, one where love was not fleeting but steadfast, where family was not fractured but whole. And as the days turned to weeks, she embraced it fully, knowing that whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them not alone, but together.